3 days before Christmas, my daughter called and said words that shattered 37 years of my motherhood in an instant. "Mom, don't come. My husband says you make everything too complicated." I stood in the kitchen holding the phone, watching the snow fall outside the window, and felt my heart break into pieces. That Christmas night, I sat alone at a restaurant. 2 strangers saw me and invited me to sit at their table. They became my real family. But 6 years later, my daughter came back not to apologize, but to take away everything I had. This time I was ready. Thank you for being here and listening to my story. I really want to know your thoughts. Please leave a comment below. Do you think I did the right thing? If you were me, what would you do? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss other stories full of emotion and meaning. Please note, this is a fictional story created for entertainment purposes and to convey a meaningful message. Any coincidence regarding names or settings is completely random. But the message I want to send to you is deep and beneficial. I'm 64 now, but the memory of that phone call 6 years ago still sits in my chest like a stone I can't swallow. I was 58 then, 3 years a widow, 32 years a mother, most of them solo after my husband passed when our daughter was barely out of college. I'd been a middle school English teacher for 26 years, retired with a modest pension and a paid-off house in a quiet Portland neighborhood. I thought I'd done everything right. I thought I was a good mother. 3 days before Christmas, my phone rang. "Mom." My daughter said, her voice tight and rehearsed, "Don't come for Christmas this year." I was standing in my kitchen floor, dusting my hands from the sugar cookies. I'd been baking the ones she used to love the ones with the little red and green sprinkles. Outside December, rain hammered against the windows. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I thought we were doing dinner at your place like always." There was a pause. I could hear him in the background. Brandon, her husband of 4 years, his low murmur sharp and insistent. "Brandon thinks," she hesitated, "he thinks you're too much drama, Mom. You always make things complicated." Too much drama. The words landed like a slap. "I don't understand," I said, my voice cracking despite myself. "What did I do?" "You know what you did," she snapped, suddenly firm, suddenly his. "At Thanksgiving, you embarrassed us." Thanksgiving, 3 weeks earlier. I'd asked Brandon a simple question about his investment strategy. He'd been talking about some risky crypto venture, and I'd wondered aloud if it was safe, given that they had a 4-year-old daughter to think about. Sophie, my granddaughter, my only grandchild. He'd turned cold, accused me of being controlling, critical. My daughter had said nothing, just looked at her plate while he built his case against me. "I was just concerned," I said now, gripping the counter. "I wasn't trying to—" "You're always concerned, Mom," she interrupted. "You're always hovering. Brandon says it's toxic." Brandon says, "Not I think, not we feel," Brandon says. "Honey, please." "I have to go," she said, and the line went dead. I stood there for a long time, staring at the phone in my hand. The cookies cooled on the rack behind me. The rain kept falling. The house was so quiet I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the clock my husband had hung in the living room 20 years ago. 37 years. 37 years of scraped knees and science projects and late-night worries. 37 years of birthday cakes and dance recitals and college application essays. 3 years of grief I'd swallowed so I could keep showing up for her, keep being strong, keep being Mom. And now I was too much drama. I thought about staying home, crawling into bed and pretending Christmas didn't exist. But the thought of sitting alone in this house surrounded by decorations I'd already put up, by presents I'd already wrapped for a granddaughter I wouldn't see, it felt unbearable. So I made a decision. I wasn't going to spend Christmas Eve alone in the wreckage of my own kitchen. I wasn't going to let this silence swallow me whole. I washed the flour off my hands, grabbed my coat, and drove through the rain to the Cedar House, a little family restaurant on the edge of town that I'd passed 100 times but never entered. It was the only place I knew would be open, the only place that might feel less lonely than my own living room. I had no idea that walking through those doors would change everything. The hostess led me to a small table by the window tucked away from the families clustered near the fireplace. I didn't blame her. Solo diners on Christmas Eve probably disrupted the festive symmetry she was trying to maintain. I ordered the salmon special without really reading the menu. When it arrived beautifully plated with roasted vegetables and a sprig of rosemary, I realized I had no appetite. I pushed the fork around my plate, pretending to eat, while around me families laughed and clinked glasses and passed bread baskets with the easy rhythm of people who belong to each other. The loneliness felt sharper here than it would have at home. At least at home I could have cried in private. I was considering asking for the check, abandoning the expensive meal I'd barely touched, when a man appeared beside my table. He was maybe late 60s, silver-haired, wearing a cardigan that looked hand-knit. "I'm sorry to intrude," he said gently, "but my wife and I noticed you're dining alone. Would you consider joining us? No one should spend Christmas Eve by themselves." I opened my mouth to decline to say I was fine, that I didn't want to impose, but something in his eyes stopped me. There was no pity there, just kindness, just an invitation. "Are you sure?" when I managed. "We'd be honored," he said, and gestured toward a corner booth where a woman with white hair and warm eyes was already smiling at me. That's how I found myself sliding into a booth across from Dorothy and Frank Peterson, two strangers who would become the family I didn't know I was looking for. Frank was a retired financial consultant. Dorothy had been a pediatric nurse for 35 years. They'd been married 42 years, raised one daughter in the same Portland neighborhood where they still lived. Within 20 minutes, I learned that their daughter, Angela, had passed away from cancer a decade earlier. She'd been 31. "We always come here on Christmas Eve," Dorothy said quietly, her hand resting on Frank's. "It's easier than sitting at home with the empty chair." I understood that. The empty chair, the ghost of who should be there. They asked about me not with the invasive curiosity of people hunting for gossip, but with genuine interest. I found myself telling them about my daughter, about the phone call 3 days ago, about 37 years of motherhood that somehow added up to too much drama. I expected judgment, advice, the usual reflexive defense of adult children that people offer when mothers admit their kids have shut them out. Instead, Frank simply said, "That must be incredibly painful. Not what did you do to cause it?" Not, "I'm sure she'll come around." Just acknowledgement. Just space for my hurt to exist without needing to be fixed or explained away. We talked for 3 hours about teaching and nursing and the small joys of retirement, about grief and disappointment and the unexpected ways life rearranges itself, about Portland winters and the best hiking trails in the gorges, and whether the city's obsession with artisanal coffee had gone too far. When the check came, Frank waved away my credit card. "Our treat," he said firmly. "Consider it a Christmas gift." As we stood to leave, Dorothy pulled a napkin from her purse and wrote something on it with a pen from her coat pocket. She pressed it into my hand. "Sunday dinners," she said. 6 o'clock. We'd love to have you. An address, a time, an invitation with no strings attached, no expectations, no conditions. I clutched that napkin all the way to my car. I clutched it as I drove home through streets dusted with fresh snow, past houses glowing with Christmas lights, past families I could see through windows gathered and whole. For the first time in 3 days, I felt something other than grief. I felt possibility. That napkin inked with an address I didn't yet know would become my sanctuary was the beginning of everything. The Sunday after Christmas, I stood on the porch of a charming craftsman house in Laurelhurst, clutching a bottle of wine and second-guessing everything. What if they'd only invited me out of pity? But then the door opened, and Dorothy's face lit up like I was someone she'd been waiting for all day. Come in," she said, pulling me into a hug that smelled like cinnamon. "Frank's just putting the roast in." The house felt lived in and loved, worn hardwood floors, mismatched furniture bookshelves crammed with framed photos. So many photos. A dark-haired girl at every age, gap-toothed in a soccer uniform, cap and gowned at graduation, radiant in a wedding dress. Dorothy caught me looking. "That's our Angela," she said softly. This was her favorite Crater Lake the summer before she got sick. The girl had her mother's warm eyes. "You remind me of her," Dorothy said. Same gentle spirit. I didn't know how to respond when a stranger saw goodness in me my own daughter couldn't. Frank appeared from the kitchen. "Wine's open stories are mandatory dinners in 45 minutes. Fair warning, Dorothy's going to recruit you for volunteer projects." "Only the good ones," Dorothy said, swatting his arm. That first dinner lasted until almost 10. We talked about teaching and nursing about students we remembered decades later, about books and the small disappointments of retirement, how purpose doesn't retire just because you do. They didn't press me about my daughter, they just made space for me at their table. January blurred into February and Sundays became sacred. I started arriving early to help Dorothy prep learning the rhythm of her kitchen, where she kept the good knives, how she liked onions, diced the secret to her perfect pie crust. Inside, jokes formed. Comfortable silences stretched between us. In late February, Dorothy mentioned the senior center where she volunteered. "We could use someone with your teaching background. The literacy program needs tutors." I hadn't thought about having purpose again. "I'll think about it," I said. Through it all, I kept texting my daughter, brief messages carefully worded. "Thinking of you. Hope you're well. Saw Sophie's school won the science fair. She must be so proud. Just wanted to say I love you." Nothing. Not a single reply. I sent a Valentine's package for Sophie art supplies and a hand-drawn card. No acknowledgement. The silence hurt more than the initial rejection. At least the phone call had been something. This was erasure. But I had the Petersons. I had Sunday dinners and Dorothy's laugh and Frank's terrible jokes. I had a place to belong, even if it wasn't the place I'd spent 37 years building. My 59th birthday fell on a Tuesday in March. I'd planned to ignore it birthdays without your child feel like anniversaries of failure. But Dorothy and Frank threw together a small gathering. They invited 2 of my former teaching colleagues. There was cake, candles, singing. I cried in Dorothy's powder room because my daughter hadn't called, but these near strangers had remembered. Dorothy found me there. "You matter to us," she said, squeezing my hand. She brought up the senior center again. This time, I said yes. 3 days later, my phone buzzed with a text from my daughter, the first contact in nearly 4 months. "Sophie's birthday party Saturday, 2 p.m. You can come if you want." I stared at those words for a long time. If you want, not please come or we'd love to see you, just permission. Conditional, grudging, but it was something. I went to the toy store that afternoon and found the perfect gift, an art set I knew Sophie would love. Maybe this was the beginning of a thaw. I stood on my daughter's porch that Saturday afternoon, clutching the expensive art set I'd spent an hour choosing, and tried to steady my breathing. 9 months. I hadn't seen my granddaughter in 9 months. The door opened. My daughter stood there in a crisp linen dress, hair perfectly styled smile, perfectly absent. "Hi, Mom," she said flatly. "Just leave the gift on that table." She pointed to a side table already piled with wrapped boxes, then turned away before I could even attempt a hug. "No thank you for coming. No, Sophie will be so excited to see you. Just instructions on where to deposit my offering." I stepped inside. The house was full of parents and children balloons clustered in corners, an elaborate unicorn cake on the dining table. Brandon stood by the grill on the back patio, laughing with 2 other dads. He glanced at me, then deliberately looked away. I was a ghost in my own family's celebration. The other parents kept their distance, offering tight smiles before turning back to their conversations. I stood alone near the kitchen, watching Sophie, now 5 years old, taller than I remembered, play with her friends in the backyard. She hadn't even noticed I was there. That's when I heard Brandon's voice drifting from the patio, low confidential, meant for sympathetic ears. "My mother-in-law is difficult," he was saying to another dad. "Very controlling. My wife's therapist has been helping her recognize the patterns, how her mom's behavior affected her growing up." My stomach dropped. "We're trying to protect Sophie from that kind of influence," he continued. "It's hard, setting boundaries with toxic family members." Toxic, that word again. I moved closer to the kitchen, legs shaking, and heard my daughter's voice. She was talking to another mother, someone I didn't recognize. My mom was very controlling when I was growing up. She said her tone practiced therapeutic. I'm still working through it in therapy. The guilt she puts on me, the way she made everything about her needs. I had to learn it's okay to protect myself. I stood frozen in the doorway. My daughter, the child I'd raised alone, the child I'd sacrificed everything for, was rewriting our history for an audience of strangers, and she believed it, or had convinced herself she did. I waited until the other mother walked away, then approached. "Can we talk?" I said quietly. "Privately." She sighed like I was an inconvenience. What is it, Mom? I just heard what you said about me being controlling, about therapy. I don't understand where this is coming from. Her face hardened. Maybe because it's true. You were always hovering, always questioning my choices, always making me feel like I wasn't good enough unless I did things your way. That's not... I started, but Brandon appeared beside her, his hand possessive on her shoulder. Everything okay here? He asked, his tone a warning. We're fine, my daughter said quickly. Too quickly. Mom was just leaving. I haven't even seen Sophie yet, I said, my voice breaking. She's busy with her friends, Brandon said smoothly. Maybe next time. There wouldn't be a next time. We all knew it. I walked out past the table piled with gifts, past the beautiful cake, past the sound of children laughing. My unopened art set sat where I'd left it already forgotten. I made it to my car before the tears started. I cried the entire drive home, 3 hours of ugly, gasping sobs that left me hollow. Dorothy and Frank found me on my porch that evening, still in my car, unable to move. Dorothy held me while I told them everything. Frank listened carefully, then said something I didn't fully understand at the time. Pay attention to what people accuse others of, he said quietly. Often they're describing themselves. I nodded, but the words felt distant, abstract. I wouldn't understand what he meant for a long time. 6 months after that birthday party, Dorothy suggested I try something new. There's a support group at St. Mark's, she said carefully over Sunday dinner, for parents who've been cut off from their kids. I resisted at first. Support groups felt like admitting defeat, like publicly declaring I'd failed as a mother. But the silence from my daughter had stretched into months, and I was drowning in questions I couldn't answer alone. So on a gray October evening, I walked into the basement of St. Mark's Church and found 12 people sitting in a circle of folding chairs. 12 people who understood. Margaret was 72, a retired accountant whose son had chosen his wife's family over her 8 years ago. She hadn't met her youngest grandchild. David was 65, a former contractor whose daughter called him selfish after he'd helped raise her kids for 5 years while she built her career. Susan was 58, close to my age. Her son had borrowed $80,000 for a business opportunity that never materialized, then cut contact when she asked about repayment. He told relatives she was materialistic and cold. I sat there listening to story after story that could have been mine. Different details, same pattern, same words. Controlling, toxic, difficult. The facilitator, a calm woman named Jennifer, taught us vocabulary I'd never heard before. Gaslighting, she said, making you question your own memory and perception. Darvo, she continued. Deny, attack, reverse, victim, and offender. The person who hurt you claims they're the one who was hurt. Projection, accusing you of exactly what they're doing. Triangulation, using third parties to validate their version of events. I wrote it all down in a notebook, my hand shaking. This wasn't random. It was a pattern, a system. You can't repair a relationship, Jennifer said gently, with someone who doesn't believe it's broken, and you can't make someone value you if they've decided you're disposable. Margaret squeezed my hand during break. You taught them they could treat you any way they wanted and you'd still be there, she said. Now you have to teach them something different. I wrote in my journal that night, I have to be the one who changes this. The support group became my anchor. I went every other week, then weekly. I learned to recognize the patterns in my own story. I stopped sending texts that went unanswered, stopped hoping every phone buzz might be her. My volunteer work at the senior center expanded. By spring, I was leading the literacy program 3 days a week, tutoring adults learning to read. I started a storytelling hour for children at the local library. I built a life that didn't revolve around waiting for my daughter to decide I was worthy again. Year 2 arrived. My 60th birthday came and went, no call. Mother's Day, silence. Christmas, nothing. And I realized something startling. I was happy anyway, not happy that she was gone, but happy that I'd stopped shrinking myself, stopped apologizing for existing, stopped begging for scraps of affection from someone who decided I was the villain in her story. Then on a Tuesday afternoon in February, nearly 2 years after that birthday party, my phone rang. My daughter's name flashed on the screen. I almost didn't answer. Almost let it go to voicemail. But some old habit, some deeply embedded mother instinct made me pick up. Mom. Her voice was raw, broken. She was crying. "Mom, I'm so sorry for everything. Can we talk? Please." Every lesson from the support group, every boundary I'd learned to build, every warning Jennifer had given us about hoovering and love bombing, all of it evaporated in an instant because she sounded like my little girl, the one who used to crawl into my lap after nightmares, the one I'd rocked to sleep 1,000 times. "Of course," I heard myself say. "I'm here." I didn't know it yet, but I'd just opened a door I should have kept locked. That phone call stretched into 20 minutes of raw, tearful confession. "I was wrong about everything, Mom," my daughter sobbed. "Brandon manipulated me. He isolated me from you. Our marriage is falling apart, and the one person I need is the person I pushed away." She told me how he'd twisted every memory, convinced her that normal maternal concern was control, that love was manipulation. How he'd used therapy language as a weapon to make her doubt herself. Doubt me. Doubt everything she'd once known to be true. "Everything Brandon said about you being toxic, none of it was real," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm seeing a therapist now, a good one. She's helping me see how he distorted everything." "Did he hurt you?" I asked, my protective instincts surging despite 2 years of silence. Emotionally, yes. He controlled everything, who I talked to, where I went, how I spent money. I didn't even realize it was happening until it was too late. Every warning from the support group, every lesson about hoovering and manipulation, all of it dissolved in the face of my daughter's pain. We met for coffee 3 days later. She apologized for an hour straight, took full responsibility, explained how Brandon had slowly isolated her, how she'd been too deep in it to see, how sorry she was for the birthday party, for the cruel things she'd said for 2 years of silence. "I should have protected you," she whispered. "I chose him over you, and I was so wrong." The second meeting, she brought Sophie. My 7-year-old granddaughter ran to me like no time had passed, threw her arms around my neck and said, "Grandma, I missed you so much." We got ice cream, colored pictures at the cafe. Sophie chattered about 2nd grade and her new obsession with astronomy. I held her small hand and felt 2 years of grief crack open into something that felt almost like healing. The third meeting, my daughter looked stronger, more resolved. "I told Brandon I'm rebuilding my relationship with you whether he likes it or not," she said firmly. "I'm setting boundaries with him now. This is non-negotiable." We made plans, weekly phone calls, monthly visits. She'd bring Sophie over for sleepovers once things stabilized. "I love you, Mom," she said, squeezing my hands across the table. "I'm so sorry I was weak for so long." I told Dorothy and Frank about the reconciliation over Sunday dinner. They were happy for me, but cautious. "Protect your heart," Dorothy said gently. "Let time prove it's real." Frank was more direct. "Watch what she does, not what she says." "She's trying," I insisted. "She really is. You should see how different she is." They nodded, but I could see the worry in their eyes. I told myself they didn't understand. They hadn't heard the raw honesty in my daughter's voice, hadn't seen the remorse in her eyes, hadn't watched Sophie light up when she saw me. Margaret from the support group was cautious too when I shared the news. "I hope it's real," she said carefully. "But remember, people who hurt us often come back when they need something." I brushed off the warning. My daughter wasn't like that. She'd learned. She'd grown. 2 years of silence had taught her what she'd lost. That month felt like a miracle. Weekly phone calls that lasted an hour. Video chats with Sophie who'd draw me pictures and hold them up to the camera. Plans for her spring break visit. Talk of family traditions we could rebuild. I let myself hope. Let myself believe that we'd crossed some threshold, that the worst was behind us. I bought a new bed for the guest room. Sophie's room, I started calling it. Stocked the art supplies she loved. Planned the meals I'd cook when they visited. After 2 years in the wilderness, my daughter had come home. Or so I thought. 1 month after our reconciliation, my phone rang on a Tuesday evening. My daughter's name lit up the screen, and I smiled as I answered. "Hi, sweetheart. Mom." Her voice was tight, strained. "Can we talk seriously?" My stomach dropped. She was crying within seconds. Brandon's business had collapsed. The market had turned. Debts were piling up faster than they could manage. They might lose the house. Sophie might have to change schools, leave her friends. "I'm so sorry you're going through this." I said, my heart aching for them. Mom, I need to ask you something. She took a shaky breath. Please don't think this is why I came back to you. Please. The request came tumbling out. They needed financial help, $45,000 for equipment to fulfill a new contract, one that could save everything. It was their last chance to turn things around. The room tilted. Honey, I don't have that kind of cash sitting around. I know, but could you co-sign a loan? Your house is paid off. The bank would approve it with your equity as backup. We'd make every single payment, I promise. You wouldn't have to pay a dime. I hesitated and she heard it. You always said family takes care of each other. She pressed, her voice breaking. You said you'd do anything for me and Sophie. Mom, we're desperate. My own words weaponized against me. Let me think about it, I managed. The bank needs an answer this week. We're running out of time. I didn't sleep for 3 nights. Frank was blunt when I told him. Don't set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. She's my daughter. She was also your daughter when she called you toxic, he said quietly. When she let that man humiliate you at a birthday party. When she didn't speak to you for 2 years. This is different. She's changed. Has she, or does she need something? But I couldn't stop thinking about Sophie. 7 years old, losing her home, her school, her stability. My granddaughter, who'd hugged me so tightly a month ago and said she missed me. I called my daughter back. I'll do it for Sophie. The relief in her voice sounded genuine. Thank you, Mom. Thank you so much. I promise we'll pay you back. At the bank, I signed the co-signer documents for $45,000. Then I wrote an additional check for $8,000 to cover their immediate bills, utility shutoffs, overdue credit cards, things that couldn't wait. $53,000 total. The loan officer reviewed the paperwork with me, his expression carefully neutral. You understand you're legally responsible for this debt if the primary borrowers default. My daughter will make the payments, I said firmly. His look said he'd heard that before. Many times. I ignored the warning in his eyes and signed. The first payment came through on time. I checked my bank portal obsessively, and there it was proof that she'd kept her word. The second payment arrived right on schedule. The third payment, same thing. I called her after the third payment cleared. How's the business going? Really well, Mom. That contract came through. We're getting back on our feet. Thank you for believing in us. Relief washed over me. Maybe Frank had been wrong. Maybe Margaret from the support group had been wrong. Maybe my daughter really had changed and I'd been right to trust her. Maybe this time it would be different. I let my guard down. I stopped checking the bank portal every day, stopped holding my breath when the payment due date approached. She'd proven herself for 3 months straight. The crisis was over. I even started planning Sophie's summer visit a week at my house trips to the zoo, the Children's Museum movie nights, with popcorn. Everything felt like it was finally falling into place. I should have known better. Month 4. The letter from the bank arrived on a Thursday, red letters across the envelope, urgent. My hands went cold before I even opened it. Payment delinquent 60 days. As co-signer, you are responsible for the outstanding balance of $47,892. The words blurred. I read them 3 times before they made sense. Then I saw the signs I'd ignored. Month 3, the phone calls had tapered off. My daughter's answers about the business became vague. The 4th payment had arrived 2 weeks late, I'd noticed, but told myself it was just a hiccup, cash flow issues, nothing serious. I'd wanted so badly to believe everything was fine. I called her, voicemail. I texted, no response. I called again. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. She'd changed her number without telling me. The bank called 2 days later. A different loan officer, less patient than the first. Delinquent 75 days. We need full payment or we'll proceed with asset recovery. I don't have that kind of money, I said, my voice shaking. Then we'll move forward with a lien on your property. Your home is assessed at $380,000. We'll recover what we're owed. The room spun. They could take my house. The house I'd worked double shifts to keep after my husband passed. The house I'd raised my daughter in. I drove to my daughter's address, hands trembling on the wheel. No one answered the door. I knocked until my knuckles hurt. A neighbor came out eyeing me warily. They moved out 2 weeks ago, middle of the night. Seemed sudden. 2 weeks ago. Right after that last phone call where she'd told me everything was going well, the equipment, the contract, the business turnaround, all lies. She'd planned this. The reconciliation, the tears, Sophie's hugs, all of it had been a setup to get access to my equity. I made it to the Petersons' house before I fell apart completely. Dorothy held me while I sobbed. Frank made calls first to his financial advisor, then to a lawyer friend. Robert Martinez, the financial advisor, came over the next morning. He reviewed everything with grim efficiency. You need to take out a home equity loan immediately to pay off the bank, or you'll lose the house entirely. A $50,000 mortgage, $425 a month for 15 years. I was 60 years old. I'd be 75 when it was paid off, if I lived that long. My comfortable retirement evaporated in a single afternoon. The savings I'd carefully built, gone. The financial security I'd worked 30 years to achieve, destroyed. All because I'd trusted my daughter. I sat at Robert's office and signed the mortgage papers on the house I'd spent decades protecting. The house I'd scrimped and saved to keep after my husband passed. The house I'd planned to leave to my daughter someday. The irony wasn't lost on me. Frank drove me home in silence. At my door, he said quietly, "She did this on purpose. You know that, right? This wasn't desperation. It was calculation." I nodded. I'd already reached that conclusion. The reconciliation hadn't been real. The apologies hadn't been genuine. She'd spent a month building my trust for one reason: to steal from me. She'd used Sophie as bait. Let me hold my granddaughter. Let me plan summer visits. Let me believe we were a family again, all while planning to disappear the moment my money cleared. This wasn't just theft. It was premeditated, rehearsed. She'd probably planned it before she ever picked up the phone to apologize. Something inside me turned cold, hard. I wasn't just heartbroken anymore. I was furious. And I was going to find out exactly how deep this betrayal went. 3 days of detective work. Her brother finally cracked. "She begged me not to tell you," he said quietly. "But what she did, it's not right, Mom." He gave me the address. I drove there with steady hands. No shaking, no tears. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to get the truth. It was a smaller house in a cheaper neighborhood. I rang the doorbell and waited. Brandon answered, his face flashing surprise before settling into something colder. "Where is my daughter?" I said, pushing past him into the house. She appeared from the kitchen, face pale. "Mom, the loan defaulted." I cut her off. "You changed your number. When exactly were you planning to tell me?" She stammered something incoherent. "I had to take out a $50,000 mortgage on my house. I'll be paying it until I'm 75 years old." "We didn't ask you to." "I was the co-signer." My voice cracked through the house. "That means I'm legally responsible. You knew that." Silence. "Where's the money? Where's the equipment?" More silence. "There was no equipment, was there?" She looked away. "Where is my money?" "Brandon had debts." She finally said, her voice small. "Bad debts. People were threatening him." "Gambling." Brandon's jaw tightened. "It's handled. We're square." I turned back to my daughter. "With my money, that's fraud. You committed fraud against your own mother." "We were desperate," she shouted back. "What did you expect us to do? Not betray me?" My voice broke. "Not lie to me for a month, use Sophie to manipulate me, then disappear like thieves in the night. You're making this about you again. Get out of my life." The words came out cold, final. Brandon stepped forward. "She doesn't need your guilt trips." "Guilt trips." I stared at him. "I gave you $53,000 that you'll hold over her head forever." My daughter spat, just like everything else. The martyr mother who sacrificed so much. The cruelty in her voice was breathtaking. I looked at her, really looked, and didn't recognize the person standing there. The daughter I'd raised, the girl I'd rocked through nightmares and driven to soccer practice and helped with college essays, she was gone. Or maybe she'd never existed the way I'd believed. "I hope it was worth it," I said quietly. I walked out. I drove home in complete silence. No radio, no tears. Just the sound of my own breathing. That night, I sat in the house that now had a mortgage I'd never wanted and made a decision. I was done, completely done. I filed a fraud report with the police. Gave them every document, the loan papers, the bank statements, the text messages. The officer took notes with a sympathetic expression that told me he'd seen this before. I blocked my daughter's number, both numbers, the old and whatever new ones she had. I changed the locks on my house. I called a lawyer and had him document everything in case she tried to claim I owed her something down the line, in case she tried to come after my house when I died. At the next support group meeting, I told the whole story. The reconciliation, the loan, the disappearance, the confrontation. Margaret squeezed my hand. You did the right thing. A hard thing, but the right thing. It doesn't feel right, I admitted. It feels like I just lost my daughter forever. You lost someone who was willing to destroy you financially, David said gently. That's not the same as losing a daughter. Maybe he was right. Maybe the daughter I was grieving had never really existed, just the version I'd wanted to believe in. But knowing that didn't make it hurt any less. I drove home that night and sat in my mortgaged house and wondered if I'd ever stop hoping my phone would ring with a real apology. Probably not, but at least I'd stopped waiting. 2 years. That's how long it had been since I'd heard from my daughter. 2 years of absolute silence. But they weren't empty years. They were the years I finally learned to put myself first. Year 3 and 4 became a time of rebuilding. Not the life I'd imagined, the one with Sunday dinners with my daughter and sleepovers with Sophie, but a life that was mine. Solid. Real. The support group became my mission. I transitioned from member to co-facilitator, helping newcomers recognize they weren't alone, weren't crazy, weren't the problem they'd been told they were. I taught them the vocabulary I'd learned gaslighting Darvo triangulation projection. One woman told me, tears streaming, "You saved my life. I was about to give my son $100,000. My pain had purpose." At the library, I was promoted to full-time. My manager became a close friend. The children I read to started calling me Library Grandma. It hurt and healed at the same time, these kids who weren't mine, but filled some of the space Sophie had left behind. Sundays at the Petersons never stopped. They became my parents in every way that mattered. Dorothy taught me to garden. Frank tried to teach me piano. He was terrible at teaching, and I was terrible at learning, and we laughed until we cried. On Dorothy's 68th birthday, I gave her a framed photo of the 3 of us taken at the coast. She cried, "We love you like you're our own daughter." I knew. I felt it too. The milestones I missed ached. Sophie's 8th birthday, I sent a card that came back marked, "Moved, no forwarding address." Her 9th birthday, I didn't know where to send anything. "The hardest part is losing the grandchildren," Margaret said at Group 1 night. Everyone nodded. Everyone understood. But there was unexpected peace, too. "I'm happy," I told them one evening. Not healed, but happy. Frank smiled. "Happiness isn't having everything. It's being at peace with what you have." The mortgage payment was brutal, $425 every month, a constant reminder of what my daughter had stolen. But I managed. My life was smaller, but it was free. Then on a Tuesday morning in October of year 5, everything changed. I was shelving books in the children's section when the dizziness hit. Sudden, overwhelming. The spines blurred. I tried to speak to ask for help, but the words came out garbled. Wrong. My face felt strange, numb on one side. A coworker's eyes went wide. "Don't move. I'm calling an ambulance." I heard her voice distant and frightened on the phone. "I think she's having a stroke." The floor tilted. The world went sideways. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. I woke up in a hospital room to bright lights and urgent voices. A doctor was talking something about a stroke, something about tests, something about monitoring. I couldn't focus on the words. Dorothy and Frank appeared. She took my hand, squeezing tight. He pulled out a crossword puzzle from his jacket pocket. "Let's see if that brain of yours is still working," he said with forced cheerfulness. 5-letter word for stubborn, starts with C. "Kate," Dorothy said, smiling through tears. I tried to smile back. My face cooperated mostly. "That was good," the doctor said. "Minor stroke, caught early. I'd been lucky. They kept me for 3 days, ran tests, monitored everything. The Petersons never left taking shifts, bringing me real food, making sure I wasn't alone. "You're going to be fine," Dorothy promised. "We've got you." I believed her. What I didn't know was that news of my stroke had somehow reached my daughter. Hospital records, maybe, or mutual acquaintances I'd lost track of. What I didn't know was what she'd do with that information, or how quickly everything I'd rebuilt was about to be threatened again. The hospital discharged me after 3 days. Dr. Morgan, my neurologist, was clear. Mrs. Williams, you had a minor stroke, a transient ischemic attack, but your recovery has been excellent. No cognitive impairment. The MRI shows no brain damage. Your speech is perfect. You're cleared for normal activity. She documented everything in meticulous medical records. I didn't know how important those records would become. Recovery was smooth. The Petersons took turns staying with me. I'm fine, I insisted. You don't need to babysit me. Frank laughed. Not babysitting, looking after family. Dorothy made soup. Frank brought crossword puzzles. My 2-week follow-up confirmed what I already knew. I was completely fine. Walking, talking, thinking, clearly managing my life perfectly well. I went back to work within 3 weeks. That's when the news spread. A mutual acquaintance mentioned my stroke to my daughter at the grocery store. What my daughter had apparently said when, 3 weeks ago, she's fine now. 2 days later, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find my daughter standing on my porch. What are you doing here? I said, my hand tightening on the doorknob. She looked concerned, worried. I heard about the stroke. Are you okay? I kept the door half closed. Perfectly fine, fully recovered. Can I come in? Every instinct screamed no. Why are you here? Because you're my mother, she said quietly. I was scared I'd lose you before we could. She trailed off. Before what? Before we could fix things. Against my better judgment, I let her in. We sat in the living room, tea cooling between us. She apologized again about the money. I responded coldly. We tried this already. You stole $53,000 from me. I know, I'm in real therapy now. I left Brandon, finally. That caught my attention. You left him 6 months ago. I should have told you, but... She talked about the divorce, financial struggles, regret. Then the questions started. Questions I didn't recognize as warning signs until much later. How are you feeling? Really? Your memory's okay. No confusion. You're still managing your bills all right. Do you forget things, lose track of stuff? The medications, are you keeping up with those? Is this house getting to be too much for you to handle alone? I answered honestly, fine, memory good, bills paid on time, house manageable. Later I'd realize, why was she assessing my competency? At the time I thought she was just worried. She stayed an hour, cried, asked more health questions. It's not safe living alone after a stroke. I'm fine, the doctor cleared me. But what if something happens? I softened at what I thought was genuine concern. How stupid I was. She left with a hug I didn't return and promises to check in on me. 3 weeks passed. I almost forgot about the visit, filed it away as another failed attempt at reconciliation. Then on a Tuesday afternoon while I was making lunch, someone knocked. A sheriff's deputy stood on my porch. Catherine Williams. Yes, you've been served. He handed me a thick envelope and walked away. The return address, Multnomah County Circuit Court. My hands shook as I tore it open. The header blurred my vision. Petition for emergency guardianship and conservatorship. Petitioners my daughter and her husband. They were trying to have me declared incompetent. They were trying to take control of everything. My finances, my medical decisions, my home. The woman who'd stolen $53,000 from me was now claiming I wasn't capable of managing my own life. The visit, the questions, the concern about my memory, my bills, my ability to live alone. It hadn't been worry. It had been reconnaissance. She'd been building a case. I sank onto my couch, the legal papers scattering across my lap, and for the first time since the confrontation 2 years ago, I felt genuinely afraid. They weren't just trying to steal my money this time. They were trying to steal my freedom. I called Frank immediately, unable to form coherent sentences through my sobbing. They're trying to take my house. They're saying I'm incompetent. His voice was calm, steady. We're coming over right now. Don't do anything. Don't call her. We'll be there in 15 minutes. They arrived in 12. Dorothy made tea while Frank sat beside me on the couch. Let's read this together. We spread the legal documents across my kitchen table, Frank and Dorothy flanking me on either side. The accusations were brutal. Cognitive decline following stroke. Unable to manage finances. The evidence, the $50,000 debt they had caused. Unsafe living conditions, isolated from family under the influence of unrelated individuals. They meant the Petersons. History of poor judgment and financial exploitation. Dorothy read them aloud, her voice shaking with fury. Then we saw the property assessment. My house was now worth $650,000. The Portland market had exploded. With guardianship, they could force a sale and control the proceeds. Everything clicked into place. This wasn't about protection. This was a heist. Her visit 3 weeks ago, Frank said quietly. All those questions about your memory, your bills. I felt sick. She'd been gathering evidence. The concern had been theater. She'd planned this while sitting in my living room drinking my tea. Frank called his lawyer friend Jennifer Walsh, who specialized in elder law. We set up a video call that evening. Jennifer reviewed the petition with sharp eyes. This is textbook elder abuse, financial exploitation escalating to legal manipulation. But we can fight this. How? We prove you're competent. We prove their motive is greed. She outlined what we'd need. Medical testimony. Dr. Morgan agreed immediately. I'll testify this is outrageous. Financial testimony, Robert Martinez, Frank's advisor. She manages money better than people half her age. Character witnesses. My library manager wrote a letter. The Petersons would testify. Expert testimony on manipulation patterns. Frank would testify as a former financial consultant who'd seen this before. Then Frank made his brilliant move. I'm going to invite members from the support group. Why, you're not the only one this has happened to. The judge needs to see this as a pattern of behavior. He made calls. Margaret, David, Susan all agreed. Margaret's voice was fierce. They tried this with me 3 years ago, wanted my house. I fought and won. I'll be there. I cried. You'd really do that? We stand together, Susan said simply. Jennifer filed our response. Court date set for 6 weeks out. It's an emergency petition, but the judge gave us time. That's a good sign they don't just rubber stamp these things. She laid out our strategy. We're not just defending. We're putting them on trial. They won't know what hit them. 6 weeks felt like 6 years. But we prepared. Jennifer drilled me on what to expect. Frank helped me organize every financial document. Dorothy made sure I ate, slept, didn't fall apart. The support group rallied. Margaret brought copies of the guardianship petition that had been filed against her. The language was nearly identical to mine. Same playbook, Jennifer noted grimly. The morning of the hearing, I dressed in my best outfit, a navy dress Dorothy had helped me pick out. Professional, competent, not someone who needed a guardian. The Petersons drove me to Multnomah County Courthouse. Jennifer met us at the entrance briefcase and hand game face on. Behind us, Margaret, David, Susan, my army. Inside the courtroom, I saw my daughter and Brandon with their lawyer at the opposite table. My daughter wouldn't meet my eyes. I sat down at our table, the Petersons behind me in the gallery, and took a deep breath. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about my right to live my own life, to make my own decisions, to keep the home I'd worked 30 years to pay off. They wanted to declare me incompetent and control everything I'd built. I wasn't going down without a fight. If you're still here and following my journey, please leave a comment so I know you're still with me. If you were me, would you trust the legal system to protect you, or would you be afraid that your daughter might win the case? The next part will take us into the courtroom where I have to prove before the judge that I am not the incompetent mother my daughter is portraying me as. This is the final battle, and I am ready. Please note the next part contains some elements dramatized for storytelling purposes. If you feel it's not suitable, you can absolutely stop here. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined. Judge Catherine Morrison presided, a woman in her early 60s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. My daughter's lawyer spoke first, painting me as a declining woman unable to care for herself. A heartbreaking case of an adult child trying to protect her aging mother. Aging mother, I was 63, working full-time, managing my life perfectly. My daughter took the stand. She testified I was forgetful after the stroke, my house was unsafe, and cluttered. The Petersons were controlling me and alienating me from family. I tried to help, but Mom refused. She won't admit she needs it. Every word was a lie. Jennifer stood. When was the last time you visited your mother before her stroke? My daughter hesitated. We'd been estranged 2 years, no contact for 2 years. It was complicated, Jennifer pressed. You borrowed $53,000 from your mother 3 years ago, correct? Mom co-signed a loan, yes? A loan you defaulted on, forcing your mother to mortgage her paid-off house. The business failed. What business? The equipment that never existed, or did that money go to your husband's gambling debts? Objection, judge allowed it. My daughter stammered. That's in the past. So is your concern. You only came back after learning she'd had a stroke, didn't you? No, I care. You care about her house, worth $650,000. That's the real motive, isn't it? No answer. Brandon took the stand, claiming the house was deteriorating, and I seemed confused. Jennifer produced documents. You were convicted of fraud last month, weren't you? He lied. That was dismissed. Jennifer handed court records to the judge. Judge Morrison's eyes narrowed as she made notes. Then our side presented. Dr. Morgan testified first. Minor stroke, complete recovery, no cognitive impairment. MRI and cognitive tests all normal, fully competent. Robert Martinez followed. I meet with Mrs. Williams quarterly. She manages her budget meticulously. The debt she carries resulted from fraud by her daughter, not poor judgment. She pays that $425 monthly payment on time every time. That's competency. My library manager's letter was read aloud, describing me as organized, reliable, beloved, managing complex technology classes, handling conflicts, processing payments. If she were declining, I'd see it. I don't. Dorothy testified with quiet dignity. We lost our daughter 10 years ago. We're not controlling Catherine. We love her. Her daughter didn't show up for years. We showed up every Sunday. That's the difference. Then Frank took the stand, the game changer. He presented his credentials, 30 years as a family systems consultant, then looked directly at the judge. Your Honor, I've seen this pattern dozens of times. Adult children estrange their parents. Parents rebuild their lives. Children return when they need money. Parents give it out of hope. Children take it and disappear. Final stage children use the legal system to seize remaining assets. He gestured to the gallery. I've invited 3 members of Mrs. Williams' support group. Margaret, David, Susan stood. Each of them has fought off similar guardianship attempts. This is systemic elder abuse. The judge leaned forward. Jennifer called me last. Do you want your daughter as your guardian? No. Why? I looked straight at my daughter. Because she doesn't want to protect me. She wants to control and profit from me. She's done it twice before. This is attempt 3. There won't be a 4th. My voice was steady, clear, strong. Judge Morrison reviewed documents in silence. Then she looked up. I've examined the medical records, financial reports, and heard testimony. Mrs. Williams is clearly competent. This petition is entirely without merit. My heart soared. Furthermore, I find the timing and motive of the petitioners highly suspect. The petitioners have demonstrated a pattern of financial exploitation. This appears to be theft dressed up in legal language under the guise of concern. The gavel came down. Petition denied. Additionally, petitioners are ordered to pay Mrs. Williams full legal costs. Mrs. Williams, I suggest you file for a restraining order immediately. We walked out into the hallway surrounded by supporters. Jennifer smiled. You won, completely. But I wasn't celebrating. I was exhausted. That afternoon, I filed the restraining order. 100 yards. No contact. I changed my will everything to charity, nothing to my daughter. Named the Petersons as my power of attorney. I told Jennifer, if she tries to contact me again, I want to know immediately. It was done. The final boundary. No more chances. 1 year of peace. That's what I got. 1 year protected by the restraining order, Sunday dinners without fear, sleeping soundly knowing my home was safe. 1 year of freedom. Then everything collapsed. Not for me, for her. The year had been genuinely good. I was thriving at the library, working full-time, co-facilitating the support group. I'd helped 3 people fight off guardianship attempts using everything I'd learned from my own case. Christmas with the Petersons had been peaceful, joyful. We decorated their tree together, cooked a feast, played games until midnight. no dread. No waiting for a phone call that would ruin everything. I'm surrounded by love I chose, I told Dorothy on Christmas Eve. She squeezed my hand, and you deserve every bit of it. New year, new beginning. I'd stopped thinking about my daughter every day. Some days I didn't think of her at all. The wound had scarred over, still there, still tender if pressed, but no longer bleeding. I'd made peace. Then in early spring of year 6, my cousin called. Have you heard about your son-in-law? No, and I don't want. He's been arrested. Federal fraud charges. I searched online. The headlines were everywhere. Local developer arrested $2 million Ponzi scheme alleged. Brandon Harrison faces 20 years federal prison. The booking photo showed him in handcuffs. I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not vindication, just hollow numbness. Frank asked that Sunday, "How do you feel about the news?" "I don't feel anything. Is that terrible?" "No," he said firmly. "That's healthy. You've detached. That's healing." Over the following months, more details emerged. It hadn't been real estate, it was a classic Ponzi scheme. He'd taken new investor money to pay old investors while gambling the rest. Gambling debts approaching $500,000, a mistress for 2 years, 30 years younger than my daughter. When the federal investigation started, he fled with the mistress, leaving my daughter to face everything alone. Everything she owned was seized or sold. House foreclosed, accounts drained, car repossessed. Her siblings wouldn't help. They'd heard what she'd done to me and believe me now. His parents cut her off, embarrassed by the scandal. An article quoted her, "Wife of accused speaks I had no idea." The photo showed my daughter looking 10 years older, hollow-eyed, defeated. My feelings were complicated. Part vindication, he'd destroyed her the way she'd let him destroy me. Part grief, she was still my child. "You're allowed to feel both," Dorothy said. At the support group, Margaret asked the question I'd been avoiding. "What will you do if she shows up?" "I don't know," I admitted. "She's homeless now, and she has my granddaughter." David said carefully, "Compassion but not compromise. You can care about her situation without letting her back in to hurt you." I nodded, hoping desperately I wouldn't have to make that choice. I was wrong. 3 weeks after the arrest made headlines late on a Tuesday evening, I was home alone making tea when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I looked through the peephole and my breath stopped. My daughter stood on my porch, and beside her Sophie, 10 years old now, too thin, clutching a backpack like it contained her whole world. Maybe it did. Both of them were crying. The restraining order meant I should call the police immediately. My hand hovered over my phone. But Sophie, my Sophie, 10 years old, scared, confused, homeless. I looked again through the peephole. My granddaughter had gotten so thin. Her clothes didn't fit right. She looked exhausted. That was my granddaughter. My hand moved toward the doorknob. I opened the door. My daughter looked up, mascara streaking her face. My granddaughter's voice so small. "Grandma," 10 years old, clutching a backpack. All the lessons I'd learned, every boundary I'd built, warred against one truth. This child was innocent. "You violated the restraining order," I said. My daughter sobbed. "I know, call the police if you want, but please, just tonight, let her sleep somewhere safe. Brandon destroyed her, took everything, left her. Nobody would help. I know I don't deserve help. I know what I did. All 3 times. Called you toxic, stole your money, tried to steal your house. I'm the worst daughter." Sophie cried silently. I looked at Sophie, innocent, terrified, then at my daughter, broken or manipulating again. Dorothy's words echoed. "Compassion doesn't mean compromise. You didn't just hurt me once, 3 times. Do you understand?" She nodded, sobbing. "Yes, I chose money over you. Chose him over you. Lost everything anyway. You were right. You warned me and I called you the problem." I looked at Sophie. "Do you remember me?" A tiny voice. "Grandma, you used to send me presents." "Did you get them?" She shook her head. "Brandon threw them away," my daughter whispered. "Said you were manipulating us." I took a breath. "I'm not the woman I was 6 years ago, the one you could walk over. I've learned to protect myself, to have boundaries." Silence. "But I won't let my granddaughter sleep in a car." My daughter exhaled in relief. I held up my hand. "Wait, this is not forgiveness. This is me helping a child. You can sleep here tonight. Tomorrow we talk. That night, Sophie collapsed on the couch, exhausted. I called Dorothy. She's here with Sophie. I let them stay tonight. And tomorrow I decide if she gets a real second chance with real conditions. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table. My daughter appeared anxious. Sit, we need to talk. I laid out 9 conditions. 1, 90 days maximum. Find work, save money, move out. 2, pay $200 monthly rent starting month 2. Pay $50 monthly toward the $53,000 you stole. 3, find a therapist within 2 weeks. Weekly sessions. 4, get Sophie into child therapy. 5, volunteer 1 Saturday monthly at the senior center. See elder abuse from the victim's side. 6, no discussing the past for 60 days. Prove consistency first. 7, the Petersons are my family. They saved me when you destroyed me. Treat them with respect or leave now. 8, no asking for more money. Don't touch my things. Never mention Brandon. 9, I get time alone with Sophie. I lost 6 years. Let us build something. I leaned forward. Violate any rule, you're out immediately. Silence. These are harsh, she finally said. They're fair. You stole from me 3 times. This is mercy. She cried. You're right. I'll do all of it. I don't deserve this chance. You don't. But Sophie deserves a grandmother. I'm doing this for her as much as for you, maybe more. She nodded. I understand. Good. We start today. I looked at this woman I'd raised, this stranger who'd betrayed me 3 times and felt something new. Not love, not trust. Possibility. The possibility that with enough effort, time, and proof through actions, not words, something could be rebuilt. Not what we'd had. That was dead. Something new, smaller, bounded, stronger. Get dressed. We're visiting the Petersons. You'll thank them. Then the senior center to register. Your 90 days start now. 18 months. That's how long it took to build something new from ashes. Not reconciliation that implies going back. This was construction. Building a relationship with boundaries, respect, and trust earned through actions. My daughter got a bookstore job. Left early, came home exhausted, but showed up. Therapy left her crying. Sophie started child therapy. I took Sophie to the library after school. She asked, "Why didn't you visit before?" I answered honestly. "Your mom and I had problems, but I always loved you." The first $200 rent payment, her hands shook. "Thank you." At the senior center, she met Martha 80. "My son tried guardianship too," Martha said. "Wanted my savings. I fought. Won. 12 years, no contact. My daughter came home shattered. I'm so sorry. Keep showing up. That's what matters." Month 3, she moved into an apartment. I helped limited maintaining boundaries. "See you Sunday. The Petersons invited you both." Weekly dinners began. Awkward at first. She thanked them for taking care of my mom when I didn't. "Dorothy, we're glad you're here." Over months, Sophie bonded with them. Grandma Dorothy married Grandpa Frank. Chosen family and blood family blending. Month 8, she wrote an apology letter. "Called you toxic when you were protecting me. Stole $53,000. Tried to declare you incompetent. I don't expect forgiveness, but I understand what I did." I read it alone, cried, filed it away. Month 12, the first $50 debt payment. "You'll be ancient before it's paid," I said. "Then I'll pay until I'm ancient. You deserve it." The acknowledgement mattered more than money. She joined a support group for enablers. I called my mother narcissistic but married one. Let him turn me into one. Month 15, Sophie's 11th birthday at my house. Small party. Chocolate raspberry cake. Sophie blew candles. I wish our family could stay like this forever. My daughter and I looked at each other, sad, hopeful. Month 18, I invited her over alone. "We need to talk about everything." Tea between us. "I forgive you." She cried. "Wait, I forgive you because holding hatred hurt me. But I don't forget. Our relationship will never be what it was. That's dead. This is different, smaller, careful. I love you. But I don't trust you completely. Maybe never. Accept that. I do. I don't deserve this. You don't, but I'm choosing it. Because you've worked. Shown up. Actions, not words. I'll keep doing it." 6 years later, Christmas at my house. Tree glowing. Petersons arrived. My daughter and Sophie brought gifts. Sophie helped Dorothy. Frank and my daughter talked books. I watched Chosen Family and Blood Family together. Over dinner, Sophie said, "Tell when Mom ate all the cookies." I told it. Everyone laughed. "I forgot that," my daughter said. "I didn't. I remember everything." 6 years ago, she said I was too much drama, wasn't welcome. She was wrong. I wasn't too much, too honest, too firm with boundaries. I lost a daughter but found family. Strangers saved me. Support group taught me I wasn't alone. I built a life that didn't need her to be whole. When she returned broken, I let her in on my terms, with boundaries. She pays $50 monthly. I'll be $152 when it's paid, but that's not the point. She's acknowledging. That's accountability. Our relationship will never be the same. I'll never trust completely. But we have something small, careful, new, built on respect, not blood. Did I forgive her? Yes, but forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting trusting or normalcy. It means I stopped letting betrayal poison my life. Peace over anger, boundaries over guilt. You can forgive and protect yourself. Love and say no. Be family with limits. Weekly calls, monthly coffee, Sophie every other weekend, Sunday dinners. Not what I imagined, but real, ours, enough. 6 years ago alone, Christmas Eve, I felt unwanted. Tonight, surrounded by people who chose me, and one learning to love me right. Not just reconciliation, redemption, not hers, mine. Looking back at my story, I want to share what I've learned not to relive the pain, but to help others avoid the same mistakes. Don't be like I was 6 years ago. Don't ignore red flags because you love someone. Don't let anyone, even your own child, treat you like an ATM with no boundaries. Don't sacrifice your peace, your home, your freedom, trying to prove your love. Real love doesn't demand you destroy yourself. The lesson boundaries aren't betrayal, they're survival. Saying no to someone you love isn't cruelty, it's self-respect. And forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or returning to what hurt you. It means releasing the poison so you can heal. These family drama stories taught me that blood doesn't guarantee loyalty. I see it in support groups every week, grandma stories just like mine, parents devastated by adult children who exploit, manipulate, betray. We're not alone. And we're not wrong for protecting ourselves. God placed the Petersons in my path that Christmas Eve for a reason. They showed me that family is built through presence, not genetics. That love is proven through actions, not words. If you're living your own family drama stories, hear this. You deserve respect. You deserve boundaries. And if they won't give it, chosen family will. To those sharing grandma stories like mine, hold your ground. Compassion without compromise. Love with limits. It's not selfish, it's wise. If this story resonated, please share it. Subscribe for more grandma stories about resilience, boundaries, and redemption. Comment your thoughts. I read everyone. Final note. This content contains dramatized storytelling elements for educational purposes. Some details are fictionalized, but the lessons and messages are entirely valuable. If this style isn't for you, that's okay. Please seek content better suited to your needs. Thank you for listening to my family drama stories. May you find your peace, your boundaries, and your chosen family.